All right, so let's get going here. So this particular presentation is called Working Together, Integrating Solutions. We've done this presentation a couple times before, our last couple civil conferences. So this is just an update to the presentation. There's been some newer technology, some other things that have changed behind the scenes with some of our applications. So it's going to be, you may have seen this before. So we're just going to go through this again, talk about some things that may be different, some new things you may see. And it's basically just a project that we've developed over the last couple years. So next slide, please, Adrian. So the whole purpose of this is we want to just share a sample highway project that we've been developing over the last several years using a bunch of our Bentley applications. So this one we're going to feature some Bentley Infrastructure Cloud, ProjectWise, Open Cities Planner, Open Roads Designer, Open Bridge Designer, Synchro, iTwin technology. We're hoping to show how that stuff can be integrated together on a civil infrastructure project. So next slide, please. So why are we doing this? We're doing this presentation mainly because we get a lot of questions from users that get confused about how a lot of our applications are supposed to be connected and integrated, and we really want to show you how these things can be connected in a connected setup in a connected environment for a civil infrastructure project. Right? We have ProjectWise, we have iTwin, we have Open Cities, we have Synchro, Open Roads, Open Bridge. You hear of all these things. How do you bring this stuff all together? How do you make it all talk to each other on a real project? So next slide, please, Adrian. So the agenda kind of looks like this. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about our actual project and some of the details of the project that we worked up. And then Don's going to come in and talk about some of the project considerations, and then Adrian's going to come in and talk about some of the project setup and the common data environment for the project information model and the models that we developed overall. So next slide, please. So this is the project that we developed. Now this isn't a real project. It's not something that's being built out there. This is just something that we kind of developed based on our years of experience out there in the real world. So this is a highway improvement project here. It's I-95 widening and resurfacing. We've had this data set around for many years, so we just took this data set and kind of reworked it to make it look like something real that you would experience in the real world. It's a partial reconstruction of the Interstate 95 here. We're doing some reconstruction on the ramps, some reconstruction on the main line. We also have some overlay and stripping going on the southbound lanes. Got some widening into the middle. So, it's a fairly complex project. It's not just some brand new construction going through a cornfield or anything like that. So if you just kind of take a quick look at our typical sections here, you can see we definitely have some milling and overlay going on the southbound lanes there, and then on the northbound lanes is some new construction, and we got some widening to the inside with some medium barrier. So next slide, please. So just kind of the overview of the project. Now here we're inside of Open Cities Planner, where we set up 3 specific areas based on planning and right-of-way, design activities, and construction activities. So we have 3 specific areas of our project that we want to give our users access to, or the project team access to. So when you click on the right-of-way tile, that's going to bring us into our planning and right-of-way information here. So let's go ahead and take a look at this inside of Open Cities Planner. Inside of Open Cities Planner, we can bring in some of the GIS information and some of the parcel information from this particular county that we're working in. And we can find out some very good information about our parcels, the owner names, the acreage, and things like that would be needed for some planning purposes. Now, in addition to that, we also had a very high definition reality model that we're able to bring into Open Cities Planner as well to help with some of the planning and just kind of analyzing the existing conditions of the particular area here. So here inside of Open Cities Planner, we have our 3D reality model. We can easily navigate and kind of look at the existing conditions, maybe look for some issues and things like that, that will help along the way before we start our design. So you can see very nice looking 3D reality model there. It's easily navigatable with the tools inside of Open Cities. Then next, to access our design applications, to get into utilizing ProjectWise and some of our Open Civil applications, we would access the design portal area, which brings us into ProjectWise here. And then you can, of course, we can come in here and we can take a look at our composite 3D model, which this is our design of our particular project using Open Roads Designer and Open Bridge Designer. So we're going to open this up in ProjectWise Explorer, which will give us the ability to access Open Roads Designer and give us access to all those tools to do our modeling. So next slide, please, here. So let's take a look at the model inside of Open Roads. So this is our 3D model that was developed. So much like I showed in those earlier slides here, we got our 2D plan view, just kind of an interchange going on here. We got our 2D plan view, our cross section, and our 3D model view open there. And you can see the level of detail there. It's pretty high. We spent quite a bit of time trying to create a lot of detail with this particular model. As I navigate through the sections here, you can pay attention to the overlay and stripping components on the southbound lanes there. We also have some drainage structures that were created there along the closed median area. And as we approach the bridge over here, you can see that our bridge team did spend quite a bit of time detailing out that particular bridge there. They put some light poles on there. They spent quite a bit of time modeling the abutments and the piles and the piers and the pier caps. So all that was done with Open Bridge Modeler by Alex Maybridge and Steve Willoughby on our bridge team. And to look at some of the underlying components of the 3D model, of course, we can change the display there, and you can really see the detail that went into those bridge abutments and those piles and those bridge piers and whatnot. And then finally, some of the drainage structures over here that were done with the drainage and utilities portion of Open Roads. So next slide, please. So once we're done with our design activities inside of Open Roads Designer, the next step in our process would be to take this into an iTwin, right? So inside of the iTwin here, this would be something that would be used by your project manager or your reviewers, maybe to do some QA, QC, check for some conflicts, things like that. You can also take a look at item types and quantities and things like that inside of here as well. So let's go to the next slide and take a look at that, Adrian, if you will. So once the model is all over here into the iTwin, anybody can get access to some of this information, and we can start performing some detailed checks, doing some review on this stuff so that we can pass it along to some others to sign off on the design, and then ultimately get it to the construction team. So this particular slide here, we're showing some pay items where we're looking at some item types that have been attached to our model there, and you can view some quantities here inside of the iTwin. And then in the next slide here, we're taking a look at the civil design validation and analysis tools that are available to further perform some QA, QC checks on the civil data. So here we're just kind of looking at a cross-section and using those specific civil design validation tools that are delivered in the infrastructure cloud to check some slopes here. And we also have some options to check geometry and vertical clearance and stopping site distance and things like that. So your typical design checks, a lot of that stuff we can do now in the civil design validation and analysis tools and infrastructure cloud here. So next slide. So let's take a look once we're done with those design activities and everyone has signed off on the project design, it's time to pass it over to the construction team. So the construction team can utilize that construction portal to access their synchro software and their construction software so that they can begin doing their scheduling and inspections and things like that, and maybe some of their staging activities as well. So tried to make this as seamless as possible by setting up that project page and breaking up into those 3 distinct areas for planning, design, and construction. So let's move to the next stage here. So just want to give everyone a shout out that helped kind of put this project together a couple years ago. We continually add to this. Every once in a while, technology gets updated, things change, applications get updated. So we go through and we update the model. We just more recently moved the whole thing into infrastructure cloud, so it's more up to date. But For the project-wise administration bit of this, we did have a particular team. So we had Don and Adrian, and we assigned them as the task owners or the admin for project-wise. And Adrian and Kurt took care of the Open Cities Planner and the reality modeling. Myself, I took care of the roadway design and the modeling of the project. We had Steve Willoughby that created the bridges for us, an open bridge modeler. We had James Anding who did the drainage modeling. Jordan Hatfield did a lot of the existing utilities. Danny Hearn had created a lot of the setups or item types in the workspace for us. And Joey Llewellyn and Ian had did some of the iTwin civil design activities. And then we had Dan Sheldon handling the construction end of the project. So next slide, please. I think this is where we turn it over to Don. All right, so we're going to bring in Don now so he can talk about just some of the project considerations and the scope and the stakeholders and the standards and some of the applications in more detail about this particular project. So Don, are you there?
Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So yeah, as you guys saw, Scott was sharing details about the project and the purpose. Kind of want to break this up into some of the other additional considerations that we made when we went this route. So obviously, like most projects, we wanted to treat this like a real world. So we said, let's define a scope and a schedule around this. What are we going to do and how soon are we going to have it done by? In addition to this, we wanted to add some realism to it and take it even further by focusing on challenges against the variety of stakeholders that would be involved, as well as the standards we're going to commit to and those solutions that we felt were appropriate to be utilized on this endeavor. And so with regard to the stakeholders, we broke it up between an owner-operator, a design team, a review team, and some contractors. And what we're going to see is Adrian later talk about some of those details on how that was expanded upon. Of course, standards. When we say standards, many of us think just CAD standards. Well, there is certainly design standards we need to be concerned with, but there's also documentation standards and just general workflows and processes that we wanted to ensure that our team was aligned with. Some of it could have been as simple as you got to put your files in ProjectWise, name them right, that sort of thing. But they could be even more complex, as we'll see coming up. And then lastly, there's applications. So again, the applications are a critical piece to this. At Bentley, we have a huge library of solutions. We want to make sure that we're using the right tool for the task. Next slide, Adrian. So the stages, what did we focus on? Well, this is where things are fun. If you've been at this event before, and it's been a couple of years now that we've done this, when we first sat down, we said we're going to focus on plan, design, and build. So mouse click once for me there, Adrian. It should animate. There we go. And so that's what we focused on. And as Scott said, we've had this grow. And actually, this is a very interesting project. I'd like to see this mature every year at every conference. And we've done that. We did the planning, the design, and the build aspects of this. But now we started to implement the operate and maintain. So this is kind of a little addition that we added. And we'll talk and show some of that coming up here in a moment. Next slide. So with regard to the standards, I think this is critically important. We wanted to make sure that we were using kind of the best-in-class approach to ensuring consistency in our project, and we wanted to administrate using a ProjectWise managed workspace. I think everybody knows it's a good tool for governance, ensuring that everybody can utilize the appropriate standard on the project, and you don't have things sneaking in on you. Of course, we wanted to leverage the dynamic configuration. So this is a method and a means to hooking up the workspace in a very efficient manner. So you're not drawing upon countless CSBs. Just makes things a little bit faster for the admins and certainly for the users as well. And then we wanted to apply this to all the stakeholders. If you're going to work on this project, you needed to adhere to those rules. And we also wanted to establish some additional administration where we constrain the solutions that were being used and the version, as well as we wanted to break those standards up in a meaningful way. We have many clients if you're a consulting firm, but if you're an agency, you have many releases and consultants as well. So we wanted to create an architecture that would support scalability and change as open roads and the industry changes and moves towards digital delivery. The goal here is to keep everyone consistent. Next slide. So those standards are your CAD standards. The next standards we wanted to talk about is more in line with our workflow. And we've discussed this in the past, and it's becoming a very popular topic as we're moving towards digital delivery, and that is the ISO 19650 standard. If you're unfamiliar with it, it is an international standard, and it's built around a unified framework just to ensure that things are being done appropriately as we've moved into the BIM world. And it's just worth noting that we took advantage of this because ProjectWise is able to manage ISO 19650 within its environment. Next slide, please. So what are our solutions? Well, if you were in the presentations in the past, you'll have noticed maybe a few things have changed, some terms have changed, but more or less we've kind of kept things on the same path. We were using OpenCity's Planner to assist in the planning aspect. Some of it's just kind of understanding the situation at hand. Where's my right-of-way? Did survey capture enough area? We did leverage some of the terrain fed back into that, for example. So we want to see that kind of from a planning perspective. There could be many stakeholders involved. But then when we got into the design aspect, of course, we want to leverage both Open Roads and Open Bridge, respectively, to support our model-based infrastructure needs there. Now, once we took it through that, we expanded upon Bentley Infrastructure Cloud, which is kind of combining a few things, and we're going to see that it's incorporating Synchro and ProjectWise under this infrastructure cloud kind of experience. But I do want to point out a few things, and one is that we're leveraging the reality management capabilities. So we had flown a drone, and so the aerial imagery gave us an opportunity to host that data through our reality management so it could stream into our files. We did not load those directly in ProjectWise. And then the iTwin technology, of course. The power behind everything we're doing now is to go to a brand-inclusive data model. And then we wanted to put that on a final stage for the operations and maintenance aspect, and that's iTwin Experience here. So just a couple little calibrations there. Next slide, please. So putting this together, how did we envision this? Well, I'm probably not the best at graphics here per se, even though I spent a career drawing. But just to illustrate this, I kind of saw this both in design and build as the green for design and the orange for kind of build. And all of that sits on top of iTwin. iTwin is the kind of the center of our data model. And so we want to make sure that we've got both kind of the left and the right lobes of the brain there functioning around that idea. Now, within those realms, ProjectWise, Open Roads, and an Open Bridge are critical for the design, whereas Synchro is going to help us on the build aspect. And again, all of this is kind of encapsulated. Oh, go back once, Adrian. All of this is encapsulated around the concept of OpenCity's Planner, which was helping us on the front end of planning, and then iTwin Experience to help us kind of on the exit, that final kind of silver platter moment where everything's done and we can now take it to operations and maintenance. Okay, next slide. So if we think about ProjectWise and we think about iTwin or infrastructure digital twins, essentially what we were doing is leveraging the embodiment of ProjectWise and the fact that we were using the kind of web thin client that is Bentley Infrastructure Cloud and ProjectWise Design Integration, which is a traditional document management solution. We were using these collectively, but using the Infrastructure Cloud environment to generate our iTwins. So all of this curation of data as it's going through workflows, through ISO 19650 under managed standards and different security models with personas that Adrian will talk more about. As it was going through that journey, we are essentially scheduling iTwin creation through the web thin client as validators and generating as iTwins. Next slide. And so who are the users and what are the capabilities? And I've talked about this before. Well, if you're using Bentley Infrastructure Cloud or like I like to call it, a web thin client, you can combine that with ProjectWise Drive. There's a lot of advantages to doing this, and it caters to all users. It's not just exclusive to to project managers or designers or reviewers. It's really for everybody. Of course, when you utilize this, there's a lot of functionality here, But the one thing to note is that it does not incorporate a managed workspace. So in those instances, if you were an engineer or a designer, you would be leveraging ProjectWise Explorer in combination so that you could actually access your documentation with the managed workspace. So in all instances, the ProjectWise Explorer, is an installation, a client, if you will, that allows you to access your documents. And that is an installation. I do want to point out that Bentley Infrastructure Cloud is not an installation. It's a web browser. Now, of course, ProjectWise Drive is an install to help assist with some of it, but that's an optional tool there. But if you wanted to pick your path, if you're a PM, you're most likely going to want to go through Bentley Infrastructure Cloud with ProjectWise Drive. And if you're a heavy-ended user, an engineer, designer, drafter, you're going to want to go down the journey of ProjectWise Explorer. But it is worth mentioning it's being space. So next slide, please. All right. So what does it look like? So a couple updates here as well. We did a lot of our work, and somebody asked a question earlier, and I answered back, hopefully in a complete manner there, or as full as could be. They were asking about the terrain. Well, we did the processing for things like survey in the Open Roads solution, so we're using our survey module. And what we were doing is working with those files inside of ProjectWise. Now, once we created some good content that we felt was meaningful for the planning team to review, we were sending that back into OpenCity's Planner. So it's a little, kind of going a little backwards maybe in the process, but it was to help with some very preliminary information for understanding. And it's worth mentioning, you could have also integrated Concept Station to show some preliminary conceptual models if you wanted in that manner as well. But once we've done that, it went through the typical journey of survey existing conditions, then start your design, and then once we get to that moment, there's a sweet spot where we start delivering iTwins in such a manner that then the Synchro team could leverage that on the build side. So essentially we're doing this design build kind of handoff, if you will. That could be a very static handoff, or it could be a live integrated handoff there where you're working together. And so as we took it through that, we're generating iTwins and ultimately coming out the other side, supporting our operations and maintenance activities with iTwin Experience. So next slide, please. So OpenCity's Planner, Scott gave you a glimpse. I'm not going to replay the video, just give you a static picture here of what that looked like. We used it to curate an experience for our client in this case. So maybe the owner of the asset wants to have kind of a page of understanding. They can see the plan, the design, and the construction. Of course, the operate and maintain might be separate to this project activity once it becomes an asset. And in this journey, it gives them just a landing page. Of course, it's managed through different security models. So maybe only the planners see planning, maybe only the design sees design or certain parts of it, depending on contract. And same with the construction. But if you were the owner of this, you might want visibility of everything. And we leveraged OpenCity's Planner to curate a page to support that. Next slide. From there, again, we're leveraging Bentley Infrastructure Cloud's design component. The design component here is a landing page for the project for the design team. It assists them with understanding the work that needed to be done, the activities that they had been working on, even things like the weather, as well as this is where we're managing and curating the iTwin. Of course, other things like transmittals and such, and just general project analytics can be understood from this environment. It's a really great resource for project managers. Next slide. Of course, those designers were then leveraging Open Roads and OpenBridge. So as they were using that, they're traversing in through ProjectWise Explorer, and then they can just do their typical desktop activities. That's creating a model-centric output here, as we can see. Next slide, please. Our build team, they're leveraging the power of Synchro. And again, they have their own kind of portal, if you will, that establishes an interface that's unique to fit their needs. So things like scheduling and such. So next slide, please. And just an example of leveraging that experience and sequencing in this case. And we're just playing through an example of maybe that bridge and how that's going to be constructed. So creating portals for purpose around different personas. Next slide, please. And then finally, once our project has gone through its milestones and come out the other side as a completed constructed solution, we're leveraging that data at this point for operations and maintenance. And just, this is great for taking what was gone through those significant stages of planning and design and construction out to the O&M side, where now we can do inspections, we can have, drone flights done for crack detection, things like that. And we can even align it with IoT sensors and things and continue to monitor and meter the performance of the project. And so that's the pathway that we took from the kind of architectural aspect of what's the workflow, why did we do it, what were the considerations. I believe that is my last slide, and I think I hand it off to Adrian.
Yes, thank you, Don. So the next thing I'll talk about is the common data requirements and how we set up the common data environment to help out with the team's needs. So when we looked at the project details and considerations, we found there was going to be a few requirements for the common data environment, including providing entry points for different personas. Don showed the output of that. Utilizing reality data from the project area, delivering a project information model to the DOT, and to present the project status to the project manager. Setting up the common data environment, I gathered resources and reference material, then we created a framework for the project information model, and then implemented those role-based entry points. So we'll kind of go over each of those topics. Let's see how these items fit together. In this project, we had three major task groups. We had right-of-way and survey, which were doing the planning, or they worked with the planners. Then we had the design and the construction as well. The core data of the system includes references, resources, documents, and design models. And as Don pointed out before, the core data is stored as files and data in ProjectWise and reality management. And that was previously known as context share. So we did have a reality mesh that was housed in our reality management catalog, if you will. The project information model ties together the appropriate reality data, GIS data, and design models to provide review for each major task. The project model is used for different purposes, such as parcel identification, design review, and construction planning and quantity takeoffs, and then ultimately for the client with the asset information model to update their asset information model. So we use this framework again to deliver the appropriate information to each of these personas or each of these areas to create an I model with purpose for each of these situations. So we've basically presented it to the different personas in a way that makes sense for them. So examples of that might include Microsoft Teams, dashboards, iModel review, inside of the design application, as well as using the iTwin Studio to present information for the final client. In ProjectWise, we had one main work area that housed three sub-work areas that represented each major task group. So we had the right-of-way survey, design, and construction. And these task groups were then related to each corresponding cloud project. So we actually had, and that's a mistyper I see already, but we had three different projects, infrastructure cloud projects that represented each work area and was tied to each work area respectively. We had three main data sets for reference. We had the reality mesh from Context Share, which is now reality management. We had the county parcels from the county's GIS system. We just downloaded the shape files from the GIS system and then added those into Bentley or into OpenCities Planner. And then we had a civil workspace from the DOT. So with this, armed with this information and resources, we were able to implement our standards. The reality data was built by flying a UAV to take photos and then using what's now iTwin Capture to process the aerial photos into reality mesh. So it's sort of using photogrammetry a little bit, also using triangulation and meshes to build the reality mesh associated with the project. And then any of these reality meshes can be associated with one or more projects so that the project can actually use it to design off of. And they can be consumed in the project information model in OpenCities Planner and also directly into the desktop applications such as OpenRoads Designer. So I brought in the parcels from county data into the common data environment using 4 products and services. I used ProjectWise Design Integration, OpenCities Map, Design Review, and OpenCities Planner. The first thing that I did is I downloaded the county parcels and then placed them into the right-of-way and survey work area in ProjectWise. Next thing is I labeled the parcels in OpenCities Map. Thirdly, I created a right-of-way project drive model and added the text from my OpenCities Map design file that I had extracted and the parcel information from the county shapefile. And I built an OpenCities Map application using that information. So here you can see that I created the iTwin first, and I added in all the information. And then I created the OpenCities Planner by attaching the iModel and then being able to have the end user get information about each parcel in kind of a graphical OpenCities map type of way. So, all right, next, the DOT workspace. So the first thing we did was we downloaded them all and then imported them into the ProjectWise data source. And then the standards were then integrated into the Bentley design apps using a managed workspace. And as Don mentioned before, we use a dynamic configuration so that we have a framework again. Lots of frameworks that we're going to have here. We have a framework to build the whole project on. We have a framework for implementing new workspaces really quickly and easily. And then we have a framework for the actual process of design that I'm going to show you here in a minute for using the ISO 19650 framework. So a lot of frameworks are going on, and we're just building a scalable solution by having these frameworks available to build off of and to really add in the project requirements as needed. Now, the project information model is just a digital representation of one or more assets during the project delivery phase of the overall asset lifecycle. The project information model may be presented in different manners depending on the purpose of the model. And how do you make it? Well, to create this project information model, or the PIM, individual model containers that represent project components will be collected and rendered into an iModel that can be accessed by the appropriate project stakeholders. So we're basically going to build our model information models, our containers as files, and then we're going to federate all of those back into a large project iModel. For our project, we have a project information model that's presented in 3 ways, and I've discussed this before. But one's going to show the parcel maps. The next is for design review during the design phase, and the last one is for construction review and scheduling. And at the end of the project, the asset information needed for the stakeholder will be presented as a final project information model. And that's not shown on the screen, but that's what Don was talking about earlier, that we can use the iTwin experience or the iTwin, the iTwin experience or the other word, but for the end user to actually add an asset and then import the information about that asset so that they can see all of their assets in one spot. And they can have information and then use IoT sensors, et cetera, during the maintenance part of the asset lifecycle. So you'll see the project design model and project construction model in action in other presentations during the conference. So you should have seen those already if you haven't already. They may be available in parts tomorrow. All right, now to the ISO 19650. We embraced it as the industry standard approach to deliver a project information model during project delivery. The two key tenets of ISO 19650 is the first thing you're going to do is you break up your project into information containers. So we're basically breaking it up into smaller bits of information that's a little more easy to manage. And then we're going to work each of those information containers through the QA/QC process. And at the end of the day, we're going to bring all of those containers back together for the final review and to make sure that all of the different bits and pieces of the project and of the design work together and are working as one system together in one project information model. For our exercise, we were using the UK 2019 addendum or add-on, if you will, to ISO 19650. So the actual framework of ISO 19650, it doesn't spell out how to create your information containers or how to actually define them. It just has those two key principles of breaking it out into logical information containers and then working each through a QA/QC process and then federating them back together. So the UK 2019 addendum to ISO 19650, it gives us one way, or the way that the UK government would rather do it, and that's what we're using for our project here. So with that being said, the schema for UK 2019 information containers include organization, system, location, role, and document type. The role definitions and document type definitions, those are specified in the annex or in the addendum. And for the UK 2019 addendum for ISO 19650, the roles include drainage and highway engineer, geographical and land surveyor, the client, structural engineer, contractor, non-disciplinary or general documents, if you will, building and civil. And these are the 8 that kind of pertain to our project. There's about 14 more, there's about 20 or 25 in total. But these are the ones that pertain to our project. So those are the ones that we were using. And then the document types would be fixed for every project as well. There's a whole list of about 20 or 30 different document types, but again, we just needed about 6 of them. So we're needing our 2D models and 3D models. We need a combined type of model to build our composite or our collecting models, if you will. And then we needed the calculations, published reports, and other. With those 6 types of documents, we were pretty confident that's all we needed. And we could always add some if we needed as well. Now, on the other hand, the organizations, the systems and locations for an infrastructure project specifically, we need to identify those for the project themselves. So for this project, we have different stakeholders. We have my company, which is the principal prime on this project, which would be known as the appointed party. And then we have the bridge and design group, which was a sub to my company. We have ABC contractors, which is also a sub, or at least a sub to the state. And then the state DOT, which is the appointing party, which is the client. We also had 5 systems that we broke down. So we broke down if you remember, we were looking at an interchange. So we figured we needed roads, and we'll have some utilities. and we'll have a stormwater system and then bridges. And those are probably the main systems that we'll have as far as infrastructure design. And we may have kind of the miscellaneous ones too, which would be no system. But those would basically cover what we need. And within those, we identified the different locations in each system. So for the roads, we had the State Road 97 and Interstate 95, but we also had a couple of other cross streets. We had Snake Road, Sugar Hill Road, and then we had 4 ramps as well. So it's really critical at the very beginning or close to the beginning of the project to figure out exactly which locations and how this is going to break down for each different type of system. So that we have an understanding of how to tag the different files, and then each file knows exactly what container it's part of. And then for the bridges, we had the ones on State Road 97 and then a couple on I-95. So these are the main systems that we had, or the locations. Now for the stormwater system, that might just be the whole system is going to be one location. So we may not have to specify like individual system locations, but we might have maybe a culvert. Maybe we have 5 culverts. We might have some underground stormwater. So that might be a couple of different locations. And same thing with utilities. You could break it down into different locations or types of utilities within the system. The next slide we're going to see is actually the design team model on how one information container how we designed it to work through the QA/QC process. In ISO 19650 in the UK addendum, there's 3 main stages of a information container. We have the work in progress, we have shared, and we have the published as well. The work in progress is when an information container is in work in progress. That means that the only eyes on the container are the design team, the task team, and then shared goes to the whole project, and then the published goes to the client. So in our case, we did a little bit different just to make things a little simple. We had a work in progress state, and then we had the shared state where it would go for project review. It'd be disciplinary review and work in progress. And then the BIM manager discipline would be able to attach that to the composite model for the design. And when they did that, then we would have an I model that would be triggered to update for the project information model from their composite model. And then when we approved it, then we were saying that that was going to be published for construction. And at that time, the construction discipline lead would be able to attach it to their composite model. And on the next run of that connector to their information model, they would see the updates. So we basically were using these composite models to do the work to translate the files into the I model. And we would have the I models, the connections scheduled so that each time the composite model is updated, we would see an update on the next run for each of the I models. Just to kind of show you what the discipline review looks like pretty quickly, the creator creates a document, and then when created, the creator is going to add an appropriate title and a revision note right down here. And then the person then finishes the design by selecting their initials in the design by and drawn by drop downs. And at this point, they'll have a peer-to-peer peer review by a checker, and the checker will collaborate with them to make any changes. And then once that is done, the checker would then fill in their initials, and then the discipline lead would approve the work for the in-progress document by selecting approve and then selecting yes in the pop-up that pops up, and then it would go into pending approval. And this is going to signify that the design's ready to share for other disciplines and review in the project information model. And this is where they would the BIM manager would attach the model to the combined model for the discipline team. And then as previously presented, we had 3 task teams. Within the 3 task teams, we had the 3 different personas of project manager, designer, and client. And as Don kind of told us before, and Scott, we had different ways for these different task teams and personas to access the information. For example, the project manager role could use Microsoft Teams to browse for files in the document service that were in the work areas, like so. And they could also look at the dashboard service to, based on the project-wise attributes, so they can see the progress of documents in terms of discipline, suitability, and location, et cetera. And they could also view the iModels directly for design review right here in Teams as well. As far as the project designer, they'll use ProjectWise Explorer to open and edit the design files in OpenRoads Designer. And then the construction user, as was mentioned before, would use Synchro Construction Project to do their quantity takeoffs, cost estimates, and schedule modeling. The construction and design phases will be streamlined into one project portal in Bentley Infrastructure Cloud. So it's coming that we're going to streamline these together